What if I told you, you're not just tired, not just lost, but truly homeless, not without a roof, but without rest? You wake up every morning carrying weight in your chest you can't explain. You pray, you serve, you try, yet you never fully exhale. Why? Because your soul hasn't found its dwelling place. And what if I told you it never will unless that place is God Himself? Moses wasn't standing in comfort when he said, "Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations." He was in the wilderness, surrounded by dust, burden, change, uncertainty, and yet he declared rest right there in the middle of restlessness. How? Because Moses had discovered something most of us only talk about, a soul anchored not in land but in the Lord. Think about it, the Israelites wandered for decades. Their tents moved constantly. They could never plant roots. One day an oasis, the next a furnace. And yet Moses lifts his eyes and says, "You, O Lord, are our dwelling place." What kind of faith calls a wilderness home? And isn't that what we long for even now? In a life that keeps shifting, jobs, people, dreams, we crave one thing that won't move, one refuge that won't break, one shelter that will still be standing when everything else collapses. That's why God invites us, not just to believe in Him, but to dwell in Him. Can you say today that you rest in God, not just visit Him on Sundays? Is He your dwelling place, or just your vacation stop when the storms come? Because there's a difference between seeking shelter and living in it. One is survival, the other is surrender. Maybe you've been chasing comfort in temporary things, income, influence, relationships, and like Israel, you find your tent upended again and again. But there is a place, an unshakable place where peace is not seasonal, where you're not driven by fear, not ruled by change. That place is not a concept, it's a person, God Himself. So here's the question: is God a visitor in your life, or have you handed Him the keys? To dwell in God is not a metaphor. It is a reality deeper than walls, safer than steel. The wilderness is not what defines you, His presence is. Moses wasn't celebrating a physical shelter. He was confessing a spiritual truth, that even in tents, even in heat, even with enemies surrounding them, God Himself was their constant, their covering, their home. And maybe that's the miracle you need to remember. You don't have to wait for the storm to stop to find peace. You don't have to reach the promised land to be secure. Because when God becomes your dwelling, the journey becomes bearable, even beautiful. The Israelites didn't have mansions, but they had the cloud by day and the fire by night. That was enough. The question is, would it be enough for you? You see, comfort isn't the absence of struggle. It's the presence of God in the middle of it. When you lie awake at night, overwhelmed by questions, do you run to Him as a guest? Or do you collapse into Him like a child coming home? Real faith doesn't just trust God's power, it desires His nearness. This is why Spurgeon said the breast of Jesus is a pillow for the soul. And not just any pillow, but one deep enough to hold sorrow, wide enough to carry shame, firm enough to silence fear. It is where the restless find stillness, not because life is easy, but because He is present. Think of the stormy sea. The waves are crashing, but beneath the surface there is calm. That's the picture of the believer who dwells in God. On the outside, everything shakes. On the inside, everything is anchored. You are not at peace because the world makes sense. You are at peace because you live in the one who holds it. And when serpents came for Israel, when Amalekites charged from the hills, when the wind howled through thin tents at night, they were never truly vulnerable, because they were not just surrounded by threat. They were surrounded by God. So how about you? What surrounds you today? Fear, shame, uncertainty. What if those things aren't your prison, but your invitation to come home? There's a strange kind of security that comes when God is your home, not because threats disappear, but because they lose their power to define you. The same wind that chills the tent can't touch the soul that rests in God. The same battles that drain the body cannot shake the heart that knows where it belongs. The world we live in is filled with change. Just like Israel moved from palm trees to burning sands, from shade to desert canyons, we too move between seasons, joy to sorrow, comfort to confusion. But Moses teaches us something radical. Even in constant movement, there can be constant peace. Because when your soul is anchored in God, you're not truly moving, you're staying. He remains when everything else fades. You might lose income. You might lose plans, you might lose people, but you cannot lose God. He is not rented, He is not seasonal, He is not fragile. The house of God is not made of wood, it is made of promises, and those promises do not collapse when storms come. They hold. Can you say that about anything else in your life? This is why Spurgeon called God an impregnable tower. In Him you are not merely protected, you are sealed, not just hidden but held, not just guarded but loved, and love is the greatest fortress of all. Even in the valley of the shadow of death, the psalmist didn't say, "I built a shelter." He said, "You are with me." Because when God is your dwelling, the location doesn't matter, the temperature doesn't matter, the threat doesn't matter, presence is what matters. Do you know what it is to be still while the world spins around you? Do you know what it is to be safe while pain knocks on your door? Do you know what it is to laugh even as the arrows of accusation fly past your name? That's not denial, that's dwelling. And that's the invitation, to live so close to God that your circumstances become details, not definitions. To live so deeply in Him that even grief becomes holy, that even the desert becomes sacred, that even the enemy's taunts become background noise. You don't need the war to stop, you need a different address. Some of you have been wandering your whole life, not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally, inwardly. You've set up tents in careers, relationships, ideologies, hopping to find something permanent, but everything shifts, everything fades, and deep down you're tired of packing up hope just to move again. Maybe that's because you were never meant to live in a tent of your own making. You were made to dwell in God. There's a reason the psalm says, "Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations." Not a building, not a feeling, not a nation, a person, because buildings can collapse, feelings can change, nations can fall, but God remains. And He doesn't just remain, He welcomes. In Him there is no eviction, no expiration, no decline notice. You don't wake up one day to find that grace has run out. You don't open the door to discover love has moved away. The home God offers is eternal, not because you're strong enough to stay, but because He's faithful enough to hold you. Can you imagine what your soul would be like if it stopped running? If it found a home not in resolution, but in surrender? If it stopped demanding answers and started resting in presence? That's what the wilderness teaches us. That comfort is not found in the ground beneath us, but in the God above us. That rest is not the absence of movement, but the presence of intimacy. That peace is not when things settle, but when faith roots itself in the unshakable. Even when the wind howls, even when serpents bite, even when the journey is exhausting, there is a place that never shifts, a heart that never fails, a refuge that never weakens, and that place is your God. But you must move in. Not visit, not peek through the windows, not stand on the porch when life hurts, but move in. Live there, pray there, cry there, trust there. Because the dwelling place isn't an idea, it's an address, and you've been invited. To dwell in God means more than safety, it means surrender. It means being at home enough to be honest. You can lay down your masks. You don't have to impress Him, you don't have to perform. When God is your dwelling, you stop pretending and start breathing. You speak freely. You confess deeply. You rest fully. That's what Moses understood. He wasn't just calling God His refuge, he was calling Him His home. A place where you can open every cabinet of your heart and say, "Search me." A place where you can collapse into grace and know you'll be held. A place where your secrets aren't shocking and your pain isn't rejected. Because home is where love remains, even when you're not perfect. Have you ever had that moment when no one else understands and you can barely explain it yourself, but somehow in His presence you feel known, not just seen but deeply understood? And in that moment the chaos outside doesn't stop, but something inside you does. The striving halts, the fear retreats. That's the power of a dwelling place. That's the gift of being with God not as a guest, but as a son, as a daughter. That's why Spurgeon said God isn't just our tent, He is our house. Tents are for travelers. Houses are for family. Tents are temporary. Houses are permanent. And the house of God has no cracks in its foundation, no termites in its beams, no shortage in its supply. There is food for your soul at His table. There is shelter for your fears in His walls. There is rest for your wounds in His rooms. But you must stop sleeping outside when the door is wide open. You don't earn this house. You enter it not with money, not with strength, but with surrender. And once you do, you'll find what the restless world can never offer, a place where your soul finally says, I'm home. The beauty of dwelling in God is not just that He shelters you, but that He desires you. He doesn't tolerate your presence, He delights in it. The one who carved mountains and commands stars is not too busy to listen when you whisper. He is not distant, He is not cold, He is not a landlord, He is a father. And in His house, you're not a tenant, you're His child. That changes everything, because when you belong in a place, you stop fighting to prove your worth. You stop fearing abandonment. You start living like someone who's truly loved. The home becomes more than walls, it becomes identity. And when your identity is rooted in God, storms no longer steal your name. Accusations no longer define your value. Failures no longer determine your future. But this only happens when you actually live there, not when you visit God on Sundays, not when you open your Bible just to find a solution, not when you pray only out of panic, but when you abide, when you settle your soul into Him like the safest bed you've ever known. And yes, sometimes it still hurts. Sometimes grief still comes like a flood, but even then there is rest. Not a silence that denies the pain, but a presence that holds it. Even when your eyes are full of tears, your heart can be full of peace, because you're not alone in the pain, you're home. Have you ever felt that kind of peace? Not the kind that says everything's okay, but the kind that says you're held even when it's not. That's what God offers, not escape, but embrace. And once you've tasted that, the world loses its grip. Its pleasures don't satisfy like they used to. Its promises feel thin, because you've found something deeper, stronger, eternal. You no longer wander like a bird without a nest. You no longer search for meaning in the shifting sand, because your soul has moved in, and it has no plans to leave. There is something sacred about permanence in a world obsessed with novelty. We chase the next thing, the new feeling, the different season. But what if true freedom isn't found in constant movement but in unwavering presence? That's the paradox of faith. While the world calls you to run, God calls you to remain, to plant your soul in His faithfulness and stay. Moses had seen palaces, he stood in Pharaoh's courts. He'd held earthly power in his hands, but in the end he declared one truth: Lord, you have been our dwelling place. Not success, not status, you, because when everything else fades, and it will, only one home remains. So many are spiritually homeless, even while surrounded by physical comfort. They live in mansions but feel like orphans. They attend churches but feel like strangers. They recite prayers but feel unheard. Why? Because they haven't moved in. They've visited God but they haven't stayed. And yet He waits, patient, still, steady, not waving judgment but offering rest, not demanding rent but inviting relationship. Have you accepted that invitation? Or are you still sitting on the doorstep of grace, thinking you're too broken to walk in? Spurgeon painted a picture of the houseless soul, a spirit wandering through eternity without shelter, crying for refuge after refusing it. That image is not a threat, it's a warning, because hell is not just a place of fire, it is a place without home, an eternity of wandering, of ache, of isolation. But the door is open today, and there is no list of requirements, no credit check of righteousness, no religious resume, just the whisper of surrender: Lord, I need a place to rest. And He answers, come in. Because this house, this glorious habitation, is not a myth, it is not a dream. It is a place where mercy lives, where grace breathes, where love never sleeps, and its walls are built not by hands but by wounds, pierced hands, scarred hands, hands that made a way. So why stay outside? To stay outside the dwelling of God is not just to miss peace, it is to miss your purpose. You were made to live in Him, not beside Him, not near Him, in Him. That's why nothing else satisfies. That's why success still leaves you empty. That's why people can't fill the ache, because the ache is not for more, it's for home. And home is not a place, it's a person. Have you noticed that even in your best moments, those flashes of beauty, joy, connection, there's still a longing, a whisper that says this isn't all? That's not disappointment, that's eternity calling. That's the echo of a home your soul remembers but hasn't fully entered yet. That's why Moses didn't just speak of God as a refuge in danger, but as a dwelling across generations. Through the grief of Egypt, through the silence of the wilderness, through the promises still unfulfilled, God remained the one place that never changed. His people changed. Their emotions changed. Their faith wavered, but their home remained. And it still remains. Have you walked into that place yet? Or do you stand at the edge, afraid to commit, afraid to trust, afraid that grace might be too good to be true? Let me tell you the truth, grace is too good, but it is true. And it doesn't just invite you to visit, it invites you to stay. Not until you mess up, not until you stop praying, not until you break down. Forever. Because Jesus didn't die to give you a weekend retreat. He died to give you a forever home, a resting place for your soul, and the keys were hung on a cross. Inside this house, your failures don't echo, your shame doesn't shout, your fear doesn't dictate the decor. Only mercy speaks, only love covers, only peace lives here. But don't wait until you're perfect to move in. You won't get clean outside. The cleansing is inside. The transformation is inside. The healing is inside. And the door is still open. Come home. Not just today, but every day. Because the wilderness doesn't end when this video does. Life keeps shifting. Fear comes knocking. Loneliness returns quietly. And if your soul has nowhere to rest, it will wander again. But you don't have to. You were made to dwell, not to drift. You were created to belong, not to survive. And if something in this message felt like a shelter for your heart, that wasn't me. That was God, calling, reminding, reaching. And if this spoke to you, please don't let the moment pass. Stay close. Come back. Not just to God, though He is the one who matters most, but also to this space. This channel, this voice, this content, it's not about building an audience. It's about building a place, a refuge for the restless, a table for the hungry, a lighthouse for the tired. So I'm asking you with full honesty and full heart, subscribe. Not because I need numbers, but because you might need reminders. Because sometimes your soul will forget what it heard today. And in that moment, I want to speak it again. When you're doubting again, come here. When you're grieving again, open the next video. When you feel like giving up, press play and remember this truth. You are not homeless. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. So yes, click subscribe. But don't just follow a channel. Follow a trail back to rest. Back to the one who's been your dwelling place all along. And if you know someone whose soul is wandering, someone who's been strong for too long, someone who smiles in public but cries in secret, send this to them. Because home isn't just something we find. It's something we share. This is not the end. It's the beginning of living from a different place. A deeper place. A holy place. A glorious habitation. Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations.